Welcome to the Authority File, the podcast where you'll hear conversations with academic librarians, technologists, researchers, and authors whose work is laying the foundation for higher education's future. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. In this four-part series, which is brought to you with support from Overdrive, I'll be speaking with our guests on everyone's favorite scholarly content delivery format, open access. We examine the current state of open access, including the opportunities and pain points for academic librarians, publishers, and researchers. We also look at the role librarians play in supporting open access initiatives, including how that role will continue to play out. Further, we talk about OA funding and its sustainability and look ahead at some important milestones on the horizon. Joining me on the program are Emily Farrell, Global Commercial Director for Open Research at Taylor & Francis, and Jenny Towns, Open Access Librarian at Emory University. In this second episode, we explore the role librarians play in supporting and advancing open access initiatives and policies, how that role might change, and we'll explore those same questions on the publisher side as well. So I'd like to, dig into a little bit more sort of about what you do, Jenny, and librarians more broadly and how they see their role in supporting open access. What are the main areas of responsibility?
I think as in all things librarian world, we facilitate access. Um, we're not gatekeepers. We're not keeping things from the public, and only someone with a library card or only someone affiliated with the institution can get to it.
Mm.
We like to make sure that people everywhere have access to information. So for our part, we're lending support via time and effort, but also in careful management of our collections budgets. For example, Emory helps support a number of external initiatives that shape the open access landscape, from policymakers to fully open access publishers. Some examples of that would be Knowledge Unlatched, the Hottie Trust, Spark, Orchid, C4 Disc, etc.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then I just wanted to follow up. We were talking last episode about the challenges of APCs, and so just for my own curiosity, like how did managing the APC process, like how did that end up with the library? Like why did that sort of make sense, or maybe not? But how did it end up with you guys?
Well, so it ended up under the purview of the Scholarly Communications Office
Mm.
before I started at Emory. So I don't know the specifics of it, but I do know that having an open access publishing fund in an academic library or under the purview of an academic library is pretty common.
Mm. Right.
Um, I'm assuming Emory looked at their aspirational institutions, their peer institutions, and saw who was funding these things. So as far as it being under the Scholarly Communications Office, because we also work with the Collections Management Department on, advising on transformative agreements or open access collection development policy, it seemed like a natural fit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether it still is. There's a lot of ins and outs of funding APCs for researchers in lots of different departments, but that's where we are now.
Excellent. Okay. And then just kind of looking ahead, like how might the librarian role in open access continue to evolve and change?
I think that in the future, the librarian role in open access is going to be even more of an advocacy role. And it's going to involve an even greater commitment to more equitable research as an ecosystem,
Mm.
as a landscape. And I talk a lot to people who have interesting ideas about what librarians do all day. And most of the time I'm talking via email, I'm on the phone, I'm, visiting with faculty in my job at Emory and previous jobs. And more and more and more, what I'm doing is talking to people,
Mm.
talking about open access, talking about the benefits, the pros and cons, talking about policy changes that, come down the pike. And that's mostly what I'm doing these days.
So just out of curiosity, once more, like how do you kind of do that efficiently? Are you sort of meeting with faculty in a sort of a group setting or individually or both?
It's mostly one-on-one.
Hmm.
I'm hoping to, with a new open education program, to meet with faculty as a group more often, so I can talk to, so I can tailor the message to different groups. So if I
Right.
can talk to all of the, or a portion of the STEM faculty at one time, maybe people can talk to each other, and we can have a better, more efficient conversation. And oftentimes, as academic librarians, we're not often seen as partners or even subject matter experts, despite all of our best efforts.
Yeah.
So, being in more of an advocacy role and talking to faculty one on one without the trappings of the library behind you might prove more fruitful in the
Hmm.
future.
Oh, that's interesting. Um, so, Emily, I'm curious, sticking with this question, what your thoughts might be on sort of, you know, librarians as a group generally, how you as a from a publisher's perspective see their role, kind of evolving in the OA landscape.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly been really interesting. I think we've, librarians and publishers have sort of had to evolve in a parallel direction
Right.
for the as open access has developed, because we're sort of making these connections in different ways than we did before. In some libraries, certainly we're seeing, as you said, where libraries are taking on the management of APCs, the administration of an OA dashboard to get articles approved through a system. So it's become so much broader than just the access piece. It's
Mm.
also supporting researchers in a way that perhaps might have traditionally been covered by the research office. But at the same time, I think, at least my impression from the outside of it is that there just is so much expertise in the library that sort of cooperation between what the research office is doing and the sorts of support, the infrastructure, the knowledge, the advocacy work that libraries and librarians can do, it makes sense that sits in the library. So it seems to me that will continue to be the case. That sort of something of a merging of not just looking. It's really sort of a pastoral work with researchers, if you like. It seems like, from our perspective, and I think that publishers sort of feel similarly, that that's what we're tied to too, in that our editorial departments work very closely with researchers. There's a lot of shepherding work. There's a lot of, especially on the book side, you are working closely on proposal development, manuscript development. There's just a lot of close work with researchers that then, on the other side, we're then working back with libraries and putting those pieces together. So how do we then, make sure that content is accessible in the right ways?
Mm.
So I think that there's certainly, again, it's transitional, but there is some of that expansion on I think both sides that we're seeing, we'll keep seeing.
Right, right. Yeah, and then Jenny, I guess like the existence of your position is a sort of signal that in a way that the library role is evolving in OA, that there's a dedicated position such as yours that kind of handles all of that.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and this is a new position, that I'm the first person in it. It was
Hmm.
created last May, so we will see what the future of this position holds.
Right, right. And then Emily, back to you. Just as we discussed, having talking about how the librarian role will evolve. Like, what about publishers? What do they see as their main impact on OA, and how that might evolve in the future?
Yeah, I think there are a few pieces to it. One part, again, is just in an involvement in sort of scaffolding the shift, which involves education.
Right.
As we've talked about before, there's certainly still a lot of misinformation about what open access is and why you would want your content, your research more accessible. And especially as a publisher that has such a strong humanities and social sciences program, there's still a lot of gaps there to be filled. I think there's a lot more misinformation still on the humanities and social sciences side than there is on the STEM side. So we're certainly doing a lot of that support for researchers. There's also the sort of distribution and infrastructure side of things as well. It's still really important to make sure that we're connected to all the right systems, that content is findable. It's obviously more findable when it's open access, but with the amount of work that's out there, there's still a lot to do to ensure things like metadata is in order, and that you can get to the content, and that when you find it and you click it, you actually can read it, and all of those pieces. So I think that just in that side of it too, the just the infrastructural and distribution side is still very important, the shepherding part of it. And then working out how we make that sustainable over time, in terms of making sure that we can still do this in a way that will ensure the quality of what we're supporting to produce, because it does come with a cost.
You just heard from Emily Farrell, Global Commercial Director for Open Research at Taylor & Francis, and Jenny Towns, Open Access Librarian at Emory University. This series is brought to you with support from Overdrive. Join us next week when we discuss some of the challenges associated with OA funding and sustainability, and why research integrity has become such a flashpoint. As always, underwriting opportunities for the Authority File podcast are directed by Choice's advertising manager, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced and edited by Choice's digital media producer, Sabrina Kofer, with support from digital media assistant, Ashley Roy. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.